Before we begin, I want you to think about this for a moment. Have you ever met someone who changed your entire world without even trying? Not through some dramatic confession, not through a grand gesture, but through one quiet moment, one unexpected instant, where everything suddenly felt different. Those are the moments that stay with us forever, and today's story is about one of those moments. So before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, life-changing moments, and unforgettable human connections, you're going to love what's coming next. Now settle INB because this story begins on a calm Thursday afternoon that neither of them would ever forget. It's amazing how ordinary life can feel right before everything changes. The world keeps moving, people keep talking, cars keep passing outside, and somewhere in the middle of all that noise, fate quietly waits for the perfect second to step in. For Ethan Walker, that second arrived in the most unexpected place imaginable. His grandmother's living room. The house itself felt frozen in time. Warm sunlight poured through the tall windows, stretching golden patterns across the hardwood floor. The scent of cinnamon tea and old books drifted gently through the air. Family photographs lined the shelves, like silent witnesses to decades of memories. It was the kind of home that made people slow down without realizing it, and at the center of it all was Claire Dawson. Claire had always carried a kind of quiet, calm that made people feel safe around her. She wasn't loud, she didn't demand attention, but somehow, every room softened when she entered it. Her voice was gentle, her smile was patient, and her eyes carried the kind of warmth that made people feel understood, even when no words were spoken. Ethan had known her for years through his grandmother's charity events and community gatherings, but knowing someone from a distance is very different from truly seeing them. And until that afternoon, he had never really seen her. The fundraiser preparations had filled the house with light conversation and movement. Decorations sat half-finished on the dining table. Music played softly in the background, while guests wandered between rooms, carrying trays and flower arrangements. Everything felt normal, predictable, safe. Then, in a single heartbeat, everything changed. Claire stepped backward near the edge of an old Persian rug. Her heel caught. The rug folded beneath her foot, and suddenly gravity took over. There wasn't time to think. Ethan moved on instinct. 1 second she was falling. The next, she was in his arms. The force of her movement slammed lightly against his chest as he caught her before she could hit the floor. Her hands grabbed onto him automatically, fingers tightening against his shirt as she tried to steady herself. For a moment, neither of them breathed. "You're okay," Ethan whispered quickly. "I've got you." Claire winced sharply as her foot touched the ground. "I think I twisted something," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a breath. The room around them seemed to disappear. The conversations, the music, the movement, none of it mattered anymore, because suddenly Ethan became painfully aware of how close she was. The warmth of her body against his, the nervous rhythm of her breathing, the way her fingers still clung to him like letting go would send her crashing back to the floor. And for the first time in years, Claire looked vulnerable, not composed, not endlessly capable, not perfectly put together, just human. And something about that realization hit Ethan harder than he expected. "Don't try to walk yet," he said, gently. Claire gave a small embarrassed laugh, though pain still lingered in her expression. "I'm fine," she insisted automatically. Ethan smiled faintly. That didn't sound convincing. For a brief second, her eyes met his, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to change everything. He slowly guided her toward the sofa, keeping one arm firmly around her waist while she leaned against him for support. Each careful step somehow felt heavier than it should have. Every pause, every glance, every accidental touch. It was as though an invisible thread had suddenly appeared between them, pulling tighter with every passing second. When they finally reached the sofa, Ethan helped her sit carefully. Claire exhaled slowly. "You don't have to stay," she said after a moment. But he did stay, without hesitation, without even thinking about it, because something inside him refused to walk away. He crouched beside the couch, gently examining her swollen ankle while sunlight spilled across the room around them. "You always do that," Ethan said quietly. Claire tilted her head slightly. "Do what?" "Pretend you're okay even when you're hurting." A faint smile crossed her lips, though sadness flickered behind it. Most people don't stick around long enough to notice. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. For years, Claire had always seemed emotionally untouchable. Calm, graceful, endlessly strong. But now he could hear the exhaustion hiding underneath all of it. And maybe for the first time, she was tired of carrying everything alone. Outside, the afternoon breeze rustled the trees beyond the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, distant laughter echoed through the house. But inside that living room, the atmosphere had changed. Completely. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt intimate, dangerously intimate. Claire looked down at her hands for a moment before speaking again. "I hate needing help," she admitted quietly. The words came out almost reluctantly, like a truth she rarely allowed herself to say aloud. Ethan leaned back slightly against the couch. "Why?" She shrugged faintly. "Because depending on people usually ends badly." The sentence landed harder than she intended. He could hear it immediately. The weight behind the words. The history, the disappointment. Claire quickly looked away, as if she regretted saying it, but Ethan's voice softened. "Needing someone doesn't make you weak." She stayed silent. "It makes you human." Something in her expression cracked at that moment, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for Ethan to realize how lonely she had probably been for a very long time, and enough for Claire to realize that maybe, just maybe, someone was finally seeing the parts of her she spent years hiding. Minutes passed quietly, yet neither of them seemed eager for the moment to end. Eventually, Ethan's grandmother returned carrying a small first aid kit, immediately fussing over Claire with concern. The practical world rushed back in all at once. Ice packs, bandages, questions, movement. But even as the room filled again with noise and conversation, something invisible remained suspended between Ethan and Claire. A quiet awareness neither of them could explain. The rest of the evening passed differently after that. Every accidental glance lasted too long. Every conversation carried hidden tension beneath the surface, and every time Claire smiled at him, Ethan felt something tightening inside his chest. By sunset, he realized something terrifying. He didn't want this feeling to disappear. Over the next few weeks, life found excuses to pull them together again. At first it was innocent. Ethan stopped by to help. Claire carried groceries while her ankle healed. Then he started staying longer. Coffee turned into conversations. Conversations turned into laughter. And slowly, without either of them realizing it, they became part of each other's routines. There was something strangely peaceful about being around her. Claire never tried to impress anyone. She never fought for attention. She simply existed honestly. And somehow that honesty felt rare in a world where everyone seemed to be pretending. One rainy evening, they sat together on the porch, listening to thunder roll across the Oregon sky. Claire wrapped a blanket tighter around herself. You ever feel like life changes faster than you can process it? She asked suddenly. Ethan looked over at her. All the time. She smiled faintly. I spent years building walls around myself. And now suddenly, I don't know if I want them there anymore. The confession lingered in the cool night air. Ethan's heartbeat slowed, because he understood exactly what she meant. He had spent most of his own life keeping emotions controlled, predictable, safe, but Claire made safety feel impossible. And strangely, he didn't hate. That rain tapped softly against the roof, while silence settled comfortably between them again. Not awkward, not forced, comfortable, like two people slowly discovering they no longer wanted to face life alone. Then, Claire looked at him carefully. Why do you always stay? She asked. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? You could leave after helping. You could keep things simple. But you never do. He hesitated, because the truth suddenly felt impossible to hide. Finally, he answered honestly. Because when I'm with you, things feel quieter in my head. Claire stared at him for a long moment, and for the first time since they met, Ethan saw tears gathering in her eyes. Not dramatic tears, just emotion she could no longer completely hold back. That was the moment he realized this. Connection scared her too, because the strongest feelings usually arrive quietly, not like fireworks, more like gravity, slowly pulling two people closer until resisting no longer feels possible. Months later, Ethan would still remember that Thursday afternoon in perfect detail. The sunlight, the rug, the way time seemed to stop the second he caught her. Because sometimes life changes in loud, unforgettable explosions, but other times it changes in silence, in soft moments, in trembling breaths, in the realization that someone has become important to you long before you were ready to admit it. And maybe that's what makes those moments so powerful. They don't ask permission. They simply arrive and change everything. If this story touched you in any way, please subscribe.